Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is enjoying this not so nice day here, at least in Melville. Hope it's nicer across across the state. But we're going to go through the the steps that you really need to take with regard to the election. As we all know, we're kind of a little bit into the election process, so some of the things I may go a little bit quicker because they're kind of things that were in the past. And I want to make sure this is as helpful for you as possible. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a highlight of what we're going to go through. Board candidate packets will be the first one. Notice of annual meeting of election, military ballots, absentee ballots, early mail voting, and election day issues. Board candidate packets, is one of the things that you're kind of working on now, have had. So may go a little bit quickly on that. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I think one of the most important things to say about board packets is they're not legally required. So if you're sitting there and saying, "Oh my God, I don't have a candidate packet," it's okay. It is a good idea. Usually, you're including information in that packet of what it means to be on a board member, a copy of a petition, and various other things that may be helpful to someone who's considering being a board member. There is no legal requirement. If you do have a candidate packet, I would recommend that you do include what are the eligibility requirements for being a school board member. You do have to be a qualified voter in the school district, which means you're a U.S. citizen and 18 years and older. One thing that is important, because sometimes gets mixed up, is qualified doesn't mean registered. You can not be registered to vote in the district, and you could have never voted in the district, but you still are eligible to be a board member. It is up to the people of the residents to determine if that's something that is a problem for them, but it is not something that excludes them from doing so. You have to be able to read or write, and you have to be a district resident. There are some groups of people that can't. If you were removed from office within the last year, you're not eligible to be a board member. The important part of that is within the last year. Seems silly that you would be able to be a board member again if you were removed, even if it was 2 years ago, but you are only excluded to be a board member if you were removed from office within the last year. Current employees, individuals who reside with another board member, or individuals who hold an incompatible office. Often we get questions about library board, whether you could be on the library board and the school board at the same time, and the answer is yes. Next slide, please. Okay. Nominating petitions. This is really probably the one of the most important documents that you're going to have. It is what actually gets a person's name onto the ballot. So the most important thing is, how many signatures do you need? Currently, the law is whatever is greater, 25 or 2%. Many districts, it is 25. But if you have a larger turnout, it's 2%. So I know I have some districts that they have 40. When you are dealing with a small city district, you actually need to have 100, no matter what voted in the last election. So what has to be included in the nominating petitions? It's the name and residence, the residence of the people who signed the petition, and identify the seat with the name of the incumbent and the length of the term. Now, if you have a vote where you vote by at large, where there's no separate seats, then you don't need to have the name of the incumbent or the length of the term of office, but there's nothing that precludes you from having that. With regard to the nominating petitions, there is no legal requirement that the nominating petitions that the district prepares or what are used. I do recommend that all districts do have sample petitions, because then if they fill everything out, it includes everything that is needed. But if someone uses their own form, they can, but it does need to include all that information. I would recommend that if you get a nominating petition that does not use the form that the district prepared, to forward it to your attorney at bond. You could forward it to me or any other of the attorneys in bond to review and make sure it is compliant. Because like I said, this is the mechanism to get you on the ballot. Next slide. The nominating petitions have to be directed to the district clerk. On that last day, it has to be filed between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. and it's on the 30 days before the election. This year, the dates are April 21st in a Central Union Free Common School District and April 30th for a small city school district. One thing I do want to point out about the April 21st deadline, similarly to the last couple of years, that is for many school districts a day that the schools are closed for the spring break. There is nothing in the law that allows the person to close that day and accept it the next day, or only have it the week before. So you do need to be available from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on April 21st for people who want to give nominating petitions. With regard to the prior week where the schools are closed, if the business office or the district clerk's office is not open, I would recommend that you make sure it's known, maybe put something on your website, maybe to include that the office is closed that week and that it will be open on the 21st to accept nominating petitions. I would also maybe at board meetings in April, just make sure people are aware that the office is closed. So hopefully people will come before the 14th when schools are closed and it won't be an issue. The notice of the deadline has to be included in the notice of annual meeting, which is traditionally in there. Next slide. Okay. The notice of the annual meeting and election. This is probably the bane in everyone's existence right now. You're working on your annual notices. I know I've reviewed a lot of notices for probably many of the people on this call. Next slide. So the timing. It has to be published 4 times during the 7 weeks preceding the date of the annual meeting, which is the election. So that starts April 1st, begins the 7-week period. The only notice that there's a set date that it has to be on, that period of time is the first one. The first notice has to be between April 1st and April 4th. The best way to do this is make sure you contact your newspapers and find out when they publish their notices, because that will dictate when the notice needs to be. Some of them only publish on Tuesdays, some publish on Thursdays. If they publish every day, you could pick any date between April 1st and April 4th. So I would recommend, if you haven't already reached out to the newspapers, to reach out now to find out when they need the notice to be timely served. Next slide. Okay, the location. It has to be 2 newspapers having general circulation in the district. If there is only one, then it would only be one. General circulation is a very specific definition. It has to be published at least weekly, contains news, advertising, and it must be a paid circulation sent by at least second-class mail. So there's some things that it may not be done weekly that wouldn't cover under general circulation. And if it's not a paid circulation, then that isn't where you should be putting your notice, because it wouldn't comply. Again, if you have any questions about whether the newspaper that you're using complies with this requirement, feel free to reach out to me and I could, help you make that determination. Next slide. Okay. Failure to comply. Sometimes things happen. You never want to be in a situation that the answer is, I didn't feel like doing it, I didn't do it, I purposely didn't do it, it's a waste of money or anything like that. But if something happens, and it happens, typically the failure to give notice, as long as it wasn't willful or fraudulent, you will be okay. The funny thing about this is we all kind of know that these notices go in the back of a newspaper that no one really looks at. But the Commissioner of Education is very hard on deadlines and making sure that you're following the law. So you want to make sure that you're giving notice. So I know we've had situations with some clients in the past. The school district did everything right. They gave the notice to the newspaper. They told them the right date to publish, and then they get a call. Whoops, it wasn't in the paper. One, you're going to make sure that you get that in writing from the paper to know that it's not the district. And you're also going to do whatever you can in order to try to fix it. So if you know the notice didn't go through, I would recommend posting it on the website if you don't normally, or maybe sending a email if you have a robocall that includes residents and people who have kids in the school and not in the school, so that you could get the information out there. But failure to comply, as long as it is not willful or fraudulent, you should be okay. Next slide. Okay, military ballots, the part 3. Next slide, please. So military ballots is, relatively new. It was added to provide people in the military the opportunity to vote in school district elections and budget votes. One thing that I think is important to know is it doesn't mean that if you are in the military that this is the only way that you could vote. If you are home from your service and you could go and vote at the normal polling site, the other piece of information that sometimes comes up is there is a separate application for the school district from the county. So often when the county gives you a list of all the voters, they will also include a list that they call military voters. They are not a military voter for the school district unless they apply to be a military voter in the school district. So this allows military voting was allowed in the general election for earlier than the school district. I think we're probably in about year 4 or 5 of military ballots. So this is no longer as new, but it also is important as well. Next slide, please. So the law sets forth all the rules dealing with the voter registration, the ballot application, and the process is very similar, but there are some very big differences dealing with absentee ballots. But one of the things that the military ballots does cause is some practical implications due to the timing of the process. Because you have situations where the military member may be abroad, there is a little bit of an expedited process, which does make the budget adoption and everything else a little bit faster as well. Next slide. Okay, so it's a 2 or 3 step process depending on if you are a personal registration, a district where you have to come and register with the district, or if you're a poll registration, it's a 2-step process. So if you are a personal registration district, the military ballot has to register with the school district. Again, registering with the county alone is not enough. They have to also register with the school district if they want a military ballot from the school district. Then there also has to be an application for a military ballot. So it's not like the permanently disabled we'll talk about with absentee ballots, where once they're a military, they're always a military. They have to request the ballot. And if you think about this, this makes sense. They may request it 1 year because they are in Iraq, and they're not able to get to the polling place, so they need the military ballot. But then the next vote, they may be home in the district and they want to go and vote on the machines. So again, if you have the application, you need to get an application for it. The military, and then there is the giving of the military ballot. One of the main differences with regard to the military ballot that is not available for absentee or any other type of election is military ballots could be emailed to faxed, and where that is not possible for absentee ballot. Next slide. Okay. So the delivery of the military ballots, I'm going to take a couple of minutes on this because especially with the other school districts, it does create a little bit of a time crunch. So the military ballots, the law provides that they need to be able to get their ballots a lot sooner because although we could email, mail, or fax the ballot to the person wherever they are, they have to mail the ballot back to the school district. So the law makes sure that they have more time to do that. So in a small city district, there's the 14 days before the vote is when military ballots need to be sent out. That's May 6th. That doesn't really cause any, time crunch issues. It's the union-free school districts, cities, central school districts, and common school districts where the military ballots have to be distributed 25 days before the vote. That is April 25th, 2025. So it's a really quick turnaround because you do not know who is running for the board until April 21st when the nominating petitions are due. You need to have the ballots completed and done and ready to be distributed to a military person by April 25th. This time, the military ballot has to be done by the 25th. You need to have the budget by the 22nd in order to comply. So this really is important for district clerks to have that ballot like kind of done as much as possible before the 21st, so that on the 21st you're really just plopping in who's running, and if you don't have anything with dealing with the budget, and just plopping that in, because that timeline is very tight. Next slide. Okay. So again, you're going to communicate with the district's mailing address with the military voter. The voter is going to designate their preference of it being mailed to them, faxed, or emailed. If they do not designate anything, so say the application is blank and doesn't say what to do, you're going to send it to regular mail. Same thing, if it's asked for it by fax but doesn't give a fax, or you try to fax it and it comes back undeliverable, you're going to send it by mail. Email, if it comes back that's the wrong email, or you couldn't read the handwriting, you are going to send it by mail. If you are faxing or emailing the ballot, you do need to include a form that has the information that would be on the envelope, because the voter is going to have to put that on the envelope that when they return the ballot. A military person could also come and ask in person. People often ask me, well, if they're in the district, why could they get a military ballot? Well, there's no exception or there's no rule that they have to be outside of the district to request a military ballot. You could have a person that is just very proud of being in the military and they want to vote by military ballot to kind of show that, I'm a member of the military. You wouldn't know who that person is because when it's out, and that's okay, as long as there's nothing in the law that says they have to be outside of the residence area, that is fine. So if they come and they ask for a military ballot and they fill out the application and they say, I want the ballot, that is no problem. You should give them the military, vote ballot. You also want to make sure that you do have a separate military ballot. So we're going to be talking about a lot of ballots now. It's absentee, early ballot, and military. They are all separate ballots. They really should look all the same, except on the back, there'll be different information. It'll say this is a military, this is an absentee, but make sure you're not just giving them, oh, here's an absentee ballot, and then you're going to use that. Next slide, please. Okay. The application forms, all the information here needs to be on the form. There's an affirmation. The affirmation, don't go around changing the affirmation. That is exactly what is in the law. So we should use all of this information. I would recommend, if you do not have so and you are a personal registration district, to have an application form ready so that if someone asks for it, they can. You also could put it on the website so it's available, so that if people need it, they could just go to the website and download the application. Next slide, please. Okay. So as we said, is with regard to the military ballot, it's going to be as nearly as possible as the absentee ballot. So I usually recommend, if it should be as nearly as possible, why don't you use the same one? Just change it on the top that says military ballot so you don't have an issue. Similarly to many other things, you have to prepare a list. One of the things that's important to remember with elections is you really just want to keep track of everything that goes out and everything that comes in. You are dealing with a situation when you have a contested election. People are always assuming that someone is assuming someone's out to get them, or people were given ballots that they weren't supposed to. So you want to make sure you keep a list of all of the military voters who were issued a military ballot, and that's available for public inspection. I also would recommend that once you get them back, so if you get the ballot back, you indicated that we received it and the date that we received it. On the envelope, you're going to put official ballot, military voter on the back of the ballot, statement of military voter. Next slide, please. Canvas of military ballots. So here, there's lots of changes or differences with regard to the getting the ballots and things like that. But with regard to the canvassing of them, this is going to look very similar to absentee ballots, early ballots. Has to be returned by regular mail or personal delivery. You cannot have a ballot that's emailed to you or faxed to you. You could email or fax them a blank ballot, but they can't respond with it. The ballot, just like with absentee ballots, have to be returned to the district clerk no later than 5 p.m. on the date of the vote. Again, it could be someone personally delivering it. And I know sometimes district clerks ask, well, if, could someone else do it? Yes, someone else could bring it in. Maybe they don't trust sending it to the school, so they mailed it to their parents' house and their parents are going to hand it in, or they don't want to put it in the mail. So when you're going through the military ballots, it's the same process as non-military ballots. So although you have to receive them by 5 p.m., you do have to wait until the end of the day or when the polls close to open those ballots. That is usually an area I have board members, superintendents saying, well, I don't understand, why can't we open them? If you can't get them after 5, why can't we open them? The law is very clear. They have to be opened after the close of the election. The main reason also is you could ask for a military ballot and say something changes. You come back home early and you say, you know what, I don't really trust this paper ballot. I want to go vote on the machine. They have a right to come in and vote on the machine. So if you've already opened the military ballot and the person shows up, you're going to turn them away, and they have a right to vote to vote on the machine. So if they came and it indicates that they have a military ballot, you would let them vote on the machine and you would pull their military ballot. So that's really why you have to use the same process. Is if you have the machines, they have a right to vote on the machines if they are there. So you need to make sure they are not opened at that point yet. Next slide. Okay, absentee ballots. This is the section that really has been around the longest. This often has many questions because there's things that have to be done on applications that people always have pause with. Next slide, please. Actually, I think, could you go back one? Sorry. Okay. So absentee ballot. One of the things that I think you may start to see is less and less absentee ballots. Now that there is an early ballot, I think there may be less absentee ballots, but the absentee ballots are still available and able to be used. Absentee ballots are only able to be used if the person is sick or has a disability, hospitalized, traveling outside the country or city of residence, incarcerated for conviction of a felony. You could only use it for those things. So when we get the application, often district clerks will say to me, well, I don't think that person's sick, or how do I know that that person's sick or is hospitalized or traveling outside the county or city or residence? And usually there is an affirmation on the bottom of the application. If they fill out the application, you take it as it is. The next slide. So the application process. Anyone could request an application for an absentee ballot. You don't have to show one of those reasons in order to get an application. The application for New York State Education Department has form applications in both English and Spanish available on the website. You should use those documents. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please send me an email and I could provide you with them. This is for personal registration districts. The completed application for the absentee ballot could be given back to the district clerk no earlier than 30 days before the elections, where that's that April 21st date. But you must receive it by May 13th if you want the ballot to be mailed, or May 19th if the ballot is going to be come and picked up. With regard to those applications, there is no problem putting the application online so that people could just print it out and fill it out and not have to come to the district. Again, the more that you have online, the less that they come and have to ask you as district clerk to do. Again, and there's nothing wrong if they come up and they say, I want 5 copies of the absentee ballot, that's okay as well. When the district clerk gets that application, you're going to review the application to determine whether the applicant is a qualified voter and eligible to vote by absentee ballot. So if the application doesn't specify any of the required reasons why they are absentee ballot, they are not able to get a ballot. Sometimes what will happen is you may get a call and say, I gave you my application and I didn't get a ballot. So then you would look and say, oh, wait, it wasn't filled out properly, and let them know. Assuming it is not the day of the vote, depending on whether it's before or after May 13th, they could come in and fill out a new application that does list the number of the reason of why they are a vote. So there's no requirement to back it up with a doctor's note or anything like that. They do sign something saying that they are eligible. So it's not the district clerk's job is to look, is it timely? Is it signed? Does it indicate the reason why they are not able to vote in person? And if so, they should be issued a ballot. Next slide, please. Another area that kind of comes into play is dealing with absentee ballots is there is a list of permanently disabled residents. And in permanently disabled, if you are listed as permanently disabled, you are entitled to an absentee ballot automatically. They do not need to fill out an application. So you will get a list, and sometimes it's pretty long. I know I have a district that said I think they have 800 people on their permanently disabled list. So this is something, now may be a good idea to, if you don't know how many usually you have, reach out to the Board of Elections and see if they have that list available, so you could start to get envelopes ready, or just to know how many you're going to need, because some of these numbers are high. Those you're automatically going to mail those ballots to those people. In poll registration, the ballot may be mailed or issued in person only directly to the applicants. In personal registration, it is the applicant or the agent. This is a relatively new revision that the agent could pick up from the district clerk, the ballots, but as long as the person indicates on the application, so we're not talking about the permanently disabled, but on the application that someone else could be given the ballot to bring to them, we have to comply with that. Next slide. Again, with absentee ballots, same thing with military ballots. You want to make sure that you have a list of all the people the absentee ballots have been issued. Again, it has to be made available for public inspection. There is no requirement for it to be posted on the website, and I would recommend that you do not post a list of who is voting by absentee ballots on a website. There was a revision many years ago that they didn't really do 100% perfectly. In the section of absentee ballots, there used to be a requirement that all of the people who are voting by absentee ballots needed to be posted at the polling places. When you look at the legislative history, they removed that from one section of the law. They did not remove it from another. But the reason being is you don't want to have a list where there's no control over, of basically a list of people, in many cases, who are not home. So if someone who has bad intentions, they want to say, oh, let me go look at this list, and now I know who to go burglarize. So you want to make sure you have the list. It shouldn't be, I would not be posting it online anymore. And this is really kind of a change in some of the districts. And also all of the absentee ballots, again, like military ballots, have to be received by the district clerk at 5 p.m. on the day of the election, which is the 20th. Again, just like the military ballot, they should not be opened at 5 p.m., but they should be opened after. Next slide. Okay. Ballot language. You are going to make sure that it is accurate, that the instruction for completion of the ballot is there, that on the back of the ballot, it's going to say official ballot, absentee voter, and then statement that the specific language for the statement of absentee voter. When you're dealing with absentee ballots, one of the reasons I think that we may start to see a decline of these types of ballots is the early mail voting, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But we want to make sure that we are doing it correctly. And again, I said that we need, with the military ballot people, if they come to vote, and even if they have a military ballot, they need to be allowed to. So usually district clerks will stamp something or put something in the books and say that this person returned an absentee ballot. If that person comes to the polling place and you see, okay, it says absentee ballot, again, the response shouldn't be, sorry, you can't vote, you voted by the absentee ballot. You would let them vote, but I would immediately then go and find their absentee ballot and pull it out. I wouldn't wait, because then what could happen is you get busy with 17 other things, and then it's left in there, and now that person has voted twice. But so it is important, and that's why you can't open up the absentee ballots until after the polls closed. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, early mail voting. So early voting looks different in schools than it does for the general election. For the general election, everyone's probably aware there's places you could go, there's machines, you fill it out, you do it, and you're good. In schools, early vote is really the same thing as an absentee vote without reason. So I know last year was the first year that school districts had to comply with early voting. And I know district clerks were very nervous that we were going to get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ballots. I think they thought it was going to be similar to what we had in COVID, where people were kind of coming out of the roadworks and voting. Obviously, when we were dealing with COVID, we were sending ballots to their house. So I think people were sending it back because it was easy. Early voting is very similar to absentee ballot, almost identical. And I said, I think over the years, we're going to start to see more early voting than absentee ballots. I said that I think people are going to stop lying that they're sick or they're out, and they'll use early voting because it's the same thing. They don't have to come that day. They don't have to worry about going out in the rain, the snow, the sleet, the nice weather. This was effective as of January 1st. The process looks pretty much the same thing for the absentee ballot, but it does give more people the opportunity to vote before. One of the things I did see last year is I think some of the candidates were really using this to their advantage. School districts, it has to be in the notice. Everyone put it in the notice, but no one was really advertising early voting. One of the things that seemed like from looking at the elections is that some of the candidates were really kind of going to their family members and friends and trying to get them to vote early to make sure that those vote. And there's no problem with that. Candidates can, give out information to people about early voting. The school district could put it on their website. Board members could tell people, vote early. You can't say vote often, but you could say vote early. Next slide, please. Okay, so the main difference is in poll registration. In poll registration, dealing with early votes, there is the ability to request an early ballot by letter. The district clerk would then mail the ballot together with the application to someone who requested it when you get the letter signed by the voter. So you want to make sure you follow that process. In personal registration, it's pretty much the same. Next slide. Okay, I'm just going to look. I have a couple of questions before I go into this. Okay. So one of the questions that came into the thing is that the lists need to be available 5 days before election, except Sunday. What does it mean for Saturday before the election? So Saturday before the election, you really should have some hours that you were there that the list is available. Another option that people have used is they say by appointment. So in the notice, you say that you're available on Saturday, but you need to make an appointment. There was a question now with absentee and early ballots. They have to be done in English and Spanish. That answer is it depends. I know everyone hates that answer, although I have a definitive answer of it depends. If you are in Nassau County, Suffolk County, Westchester, or Monroe County, the answer is yes. There's a slide coming up in a couple of minutes, but everything that you do for the election in Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, and Monroe has to be in English and in Spanish. Okay, I'm going to go back. Next slide, please. Election day issues. So we spoke about this one, so I'm going to skip it. This is dealing with how do you know if they voted beforehand? There's some sort of indication, a list. Next slide. All right, this is what we were talking about. The Spanish translation required for all election materials. For your district clerks in Suffolk and Nassau and Westchester, I think this is old news for you. You've been working with this for many years. But the district clerks that are in Monroe County, this is new. The Department of Justice back in 2018 had initiated an investigation to school districts in Nassau and Suffolk based on the Voting Rights Act and having everything with language. Since 10% or more of those areas are Spanish speaking based on the census, everything has to be in Spanish. There was an investigation, but we did not ever get any results. Districts had given lots of information to the Department of Justice, but there was no response. So now, I believe it's either this year or the end of last year, Monroe County is included as well. So the long story of the Spanish translation is anything that the district puts out in English must also be put out in Spanish. So this includes the legal notice, it includes the absentee ballots and the military ballots. It includes the early mail votes. Now, if your personal registration, the SED has both in English and Spanish, the absentee and the early vote ballot, so those are there. But if not, you do need to have people also at the election that are able to speak Spanish so that they could translate. With regard to the ballots, it does vary about what county you're in, whether the Board of Elections has the Spanish on the same ballot or a different ballot. One of the things you're going to kind of think about is when you're thinking about with ballots, if they are on two separate ballots, do not order the same amount of English and Spanish. If you know you have a large population of Spanish-speaking families in your district, maybe have more Spanish, but if they don't, you want to make sure that you don't. Also, make sure you have someone that does speak Spanish at the day of the election. If you don't have someone there, they do have some language line, Proprio. There are services that you could call and do the translation that way. If anyone on this call, this is a new thing to them, and they have any questions, you could reach out to me or any of the bond attorneys. They will likely send it over to me. I said, I have dealt with this for about the last 5 years. One thing I could say is the first year you do this, it is very frustrating. It is a lot, more work because you have to make sure everything is in Spanish. But as you do it year after year, it does get easier. Thinking about anything the school district does, if they put a big sign out on the grass that says vote on May 20th, make sure the vote on is also in Spanish, or there's another sign that's in Spanish as well. Next slide. Okay, poll watchers. I'm going to go through this quickly because we're running out of time. But with regard to poll watchers, the most important thing I could say is make sure you have rules dealing with poll watchers. Districts really get very concerned when people say, I have a poll watcher. Honestly, especially in a contested election, you want the most vocal people that you have being poll watchers, because it really limits what they could do. So there's nothing wrong saying that you have an area in the election that they could sit in and they could watch. That area can't be hidden in the back of the room. It has to be in plain view of everything. Remember, you're not hiding anything. Another thing that you need to remember is what you could say is, look, there could be no discussion while you're in the polling place, because we need to make sure that there is no speaking about who to vote for, not to vote for, because you're in the polling place. So you're basically that's why I say, if you want your loudest people there, because you're basically making it that they cannot speak. If they are outside of the electioneering spot, they could be loud, and they can't be disruptive, but they could be talking to people, telling people how to do things, telling them to not vote for the budget. We always think about the candidates, but they could be people who are saying, don't vote for the budget. Vote for the budget. Don't vote for the budget. So poll watchers aren't bad. I'm just going to look at the questions and answers just to make sure I get you. How many poll workers should be working the day of the election? Again, it does depend on the type of district that you are. If you are a union-free central, it is you should have 2 workers for every machine. But remember, if people need to take breaks, if you know that you have a lot of people coming between 6 and 8, maybe have extra people. You want to make sure that you are having everything covered. You don't want to have the lines that are too long, because at the end of the vote, everyone who's online, whether the line goes around the corner, wraps around 3 times, could vote. So that will make things longer as well. Another question is, do you need to actually send in Spanish, or can you send a note in Spanish with the normal mailer that Spanish is available via the district office? That's an unknown. My recommendation would be put everything in both languages. The problem is, because we all know this is such a timeline, it's such a vote. So if you had a situation that you sent a absentee ballot application because they requested one, and then they got it and they said, well, they can't read it, but then if they got it and said, well, in Spanish, now they went back and they got it and now they're late and they can't vote, you could have a problem. If it happens with 1 or 2 people, it wouldn't overturn the election. But if you have the timing issues with many people, and it could change the outcome of the election, you could have an issue. So for instance, if you have an election that the difference is 2 votes, all you need would be 3 people to say, I would have voted for that person. I didn't have the opportunity because they didn't have the language in English and Spanish, and therefore there. You also, to have it that they have to come to the district clerk instead of mailing it because of the timing, you could have a problem. You could see that you're targeting certain groups that you don't want to vote. So I would definitely recommend sending everything in both languages so that you don't have any issues. Absentee early ballot, could Spanish be on the back, or do we need to have two separate sheets of paper since the back has to say official ballot? So the back, I mean, I think a way to do that is you could write official ballot on the back of it and then put the Spanish, but then make sure it says on the front, turn over for Spanish in Spanish. I think at the end of the day, that would be okay. I would rather see that than have it done in English with something saying, if you need it in Spanish, let us know. So the question is, in other words, how do we know which homes to send Spanish versus not, and not wanting to send one of each to all voters? So unfortunately, we do not know which homes to send to Spanish versus not, and that's why I think the best practice is to send both. This way, you know that you're covered and that you don't have an issue. Who could be approved to work at the election? Do they need to live in the district? No, they do not need to live in the district. It is very broad. Who could be approved to work for the election? You could have district employees working the election. The law actually does not preclude board members from working the election. I would not recommend a board member working at the election. Reason being is they are, by definition, they would want the budget to pass. And you don't want to have a situation, something they say, people say, oh, well, they were advocating for the budget, or that their appearance there or them being there was trying to have people scared into not voting. It really is open. Do election inspectors need to be officially trained by the county? The people that are working the machines have to be trained by the county to work the machines. Even though when I say work the machines, it's literally here, you're just telling the person to put the paper into the machines. But the people who are doing the books or various other jobs, they do not need to be officially trained by the county. Okay. The Voting and Election Database of New York Act, that is going to affect school districts next year. So we will likely do a seminar just on that, or it will be included in the annual update dealing with school districts. So the question is, if you send the application in both Spanish and English, wouldn't dictate the language you send the ballot in? Yes, if you send the ballot in both English and Spanish, and if they return the English ballot, I have no problem with the district then just giving the ballot in English, because that's them telling I am able to speak English. If they send the application in Spanish, then you would just send it in Spanish. So yeah, I think, if you put both applications in Spanish and English and you give it to them and it comes back in English, that would be your answer. With regard to the ballots, and I believe it's Nassau County will put the English and Spanish on one ballot. Suffolk County has two separate. I'm not positive with some of the other districts, but the goal would be, is with regard to the ballots that go to the machine, is that they're both English and Spanish. I do know some of our district clerks up in Monroe County, they have new document machines that will translate it, so that keeps that being not an issue. Nassau and Suffolk County, my understanding is we still have the old machines, the old new machines, so therefore that doesn't translate into Spanish. So the goal is to try to get everything on one ballot. I believe Suffolk County won't do them all together. Okay, I guess I see it as 8:50. I think I got through most of the things. I think there's a couple slides, but my understanding is that this slide deck will be sent to all of the participants so that you have it. Again, if you have any questions, you could reach out to me. My email is mharvey@bsk.com, or you could contact the attorney that you normally deal with, and if they need me to assist, they will ask me to assist. And I wish everyone the best of luck in their elections. And I hope that we have 100% pass rate for budgets, and that everyone you want to be a board member gets voted in.